This is Culture, Communication, and Brand Moments with Shelby Jo Long, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet, hear their stories, and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Culture, Communication, and Brand Moments is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Shelby Jo Long.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Shelby Jo Long. I am CEO of Business Dynamics and of Rogue Publishing Partners. Today, I am joined by two other directors of Rogue Publishing Partners, and we're going to talk about something that's in the news right now and something we should all be thinking about as leaders, as writers, as anybody that has really important information that they need to protect. We're going to talk about the hurricane and what that's doing to not only businesses and lives in California, or not California, in Florida, but what it is doing to our nationwide businesses and the connections that we have. And I'm going to tell a little story before we get into the other directors and their advice as far as editing and writing and what we should be concerned about when writing a book. Back in the days when I was in graduate school at the University of Montana, I was in my first semester of graduate school, and I had 3 big papers due at the end of the first semester. I had taken a break from school, and I had coached a debate team for 3 years, and then I came back to school. So I hadn't been writing a lot, and I, of course, procrastinated a little bit, and I had all 3 projects going at the same time in November. It was Thanksgiving. I remember I was at my aunt's house for Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden my computer crashed and I lost everything. And I had all 3 large research papers were due within 2 weeks. And I had started all 3 of them, and I was doing pretty well on all 3 of them. And then I lost all of it, and I had to start all over again. Now, being a teacher, I hear this excuse pretty frequently, but it actually happened to me, and with 3 different projects. And I had an unreliable computer, or it was older, and that happened, and I lost it. And I thought to myself, I should have listened to the advice of my professors and save my work and make sure I have it to go back to. And I remember that story when I was writing my recent book that had just been published, but you go through so many drafts, you go through so many experiences, and you have so many different touch points with your publisher and your editor and your book designer that if you don't have the right draft, something's going to mess up in the process. So it's always good to have it on a different drive. But we're going to hear more about that from people that are really embedded within the publishing industry. So first we'll hear from Susie. Susie, you want to tell us about yourself and give us your tip on how to preserve your material through these natural disasters?
Thanks, Shelby. So one of the things that is really important is that when you're writing a book, that you don't set the date for your launch until you've actually seen a physical copy of the book, meaning you've gone through the editing, your design work you've seen all the design work, you've actually proofed the digital layout, meaning you've seen the layout of the book and you've gone through and you've proofed that your files have been uploaded to whatever platform you're using, and that you've actually seen a physical copy of your book, and that you've made any changes that you need to make to that book, and then obviously order your copies for your launch. You've got to be able to do all of those things before you set a date for your book launch. And the reason why is exactly what we're experiencing right now. We know that Florida, a good portion of Florida, has no power. So this is the kind of thing that interrupts supply chain in you getting copies of your book. But it also can interrupt just even the flow as far as the back and forth. In fact, I was just, telling Jenifer that a client that we're working with right now, fortunately, we were able to get the digital proof to them yesterday, because today our designer has no power in Florida. And so this can impact things like your launch date. And so it's really important that you make sure that you plan and prepare for these kinds of situations, whether it's a a situation like a hurricane, natural disaster, death in the family, people getting sick. Look, we just came through a major pandemic. So there's all these things that can happen that you've got to just plan a little bit ahead for. And this is why you never want to set a date for your launch, because it's better to have your books in hand and set a date for a few weeks out versus set a date and then not have any books in your hand and you've got a live event planned. So that's my tip on scheduling your launch. So just plan ahead, because you just never know when hurricanes are going to show up.
Great piece of advice, Susie. Having gone through that conversation with you a few times when I was preparing my book launch, to make sure you have them in your hands before that happens, because there's a little bit of stress if something happens and you can't control that. So great piece of advice to authors out there. Jenifer, what's your piece of advice to authors about how they can manage this stress of natural disasters?
So, hi, I'm Jenifer Jas. I'm with Words with Jas. It's a nonfiction editing service. And Shelby, your story about losing 3 files, 3 major projects, and having to recreate them all was just painful to hear, because, you know, I've had not quite that extreme happen to me, but I've definitely lost files by not having them backed up, and I've seen it happen with clients as well. So this storm is a perfect reminder to all of us of what we should be doing all of the time, which is, like you said, having backups, but also whether you're writing a book or working on a book or want to write a book, having someone else have access to your files, because something can happen to us at any time, really. And especially in a storm where you know that it's a likelihood that you might lose power, notify everyone on your project, whether it's a book or something else, notify everyone that you might lose power, might not be responsive, but also make sure that those files are in a place where someone else could pick up if you're unavailable for some time. I'm working on a project right now with a client where the book designer is directly in the path of this current hurricane. So the designer has uploaded the original files in the state that they are in right now to a place where someone else could access them. Likely and hopefully we won't need to, have someone else jump in. But if so, then we're prepared. We won't have to have someone start from scratch on that book. But yeah, so I would say have a backup locally, but also have someone else able to access your materials, and notify people that you might be unavailable for some time if you know in advance.
I'd like to just hop in here too and mention one other thing. Jenifer makes a great point that you've got to have your files in a place where the rest of the team working on your book can access them. But you also want to make sure that you have your files, for example, on a flash drive. Especially when you get towards the point of when you're doing heavy editing and there's lots of changes that are happening. Make sure that you've got those files on a flash drive as well, because you never know when there's going to be cyber attacks. Cyber attacks can take down sites like Dropbox, where maybe your files are out for the entire team, and suddenly Dropbox is gone. Nobody can access the files on the team. But if you've got them on a flash drive, that can also protect your work too. So make sure that you're also doing things that are going to protect you from any type of cyber attacks or hackers.
Great pieces of advice from people that are deep in the publishing industry, especially for those that are writing books and putting so much time and resources into that. It's important. Those are very important pieces of advice to remember. And I think it's something that we should all remember too, as leaders, as CEOs of our own organization. If we have important documents and we need to keep them protected, we need to think about backing those things up. So not just for editing, but important in editing, because you have so many different people editing and writing your book. You have so many people involved with the book process, but also important for us to remember, because we never know what's going to happen. So we have to be prepared for that. So thank you, Rogue Directors, for joining me today in this discussion. Always good to have some pieces of advice for CEOs, people that are writing books, business owners. We're all experts here, and we hope to provide that information to the audience. So we look forward to next time when the Rogue Publishing Directors can help you navigate a challenge in your publishing experience. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Culture, Communication, and Brand Moments with your host, Shelby Jo Long. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.